Can you name a movie utilizing this word, Elm Street? Notice it's called Nightmare on Elm Street. And the actor who starred in Nightmare on Elm Street, now deceased, stated, I have the articles in my file, that his mask was based on the face of Lee Harvey Oswald. Again, in one of the movies, this killer is standing across the swimming pool from teenagers, and he says, you are all my children. And they are his children, because they were all trauma-based programmed when JFK was shot, because what great, powerful group could kill a president and get away with it? Now do you understand how it works? You could program a whole generation by just blowing up a building with children in it. And they would all be programmed with the same storyline that would appear in the twin news magazines of that week. That's how you program a generation. Again, let's look. Here's a book, very hard to find. It's called Starshine. It's a novel. It had to be a novel. This is a pseudonym. Her name is Bryce Taylor. Bryce Taylor is a friend of mine. I've talked to her. I cannot relate all the things she told me about who does the programming, who does the abusing. You say, well, it's just a novel. How do we know it's true? She was on an airplane one day, and a certain man in an intelligence agency sat down beside her, pulled out photographs of her children. He said, Bryce, you may speak about mind control as you travel, but do not name names. Don't tell who your handler was. Don't name the congressman. Don't name officials. Don't name kings and queens in Europe. So she wrote this book as a fictional novel. It is called Starshine. I want you to read carefully what she says on chapter 41. Chapter 41 is entitled 1999, a plot to create anarchy in the U.S. Remember, it's just fiction, but they would not allow her to publish the book if she demanded that it was stated on the cover of this book that it was the truth. Let's read. These are fictional people. We're meeting at Karen's and the Matsons' request to share information we've gathered since our last fact-finding symposium 6 months ago. Each of us agreed to interview therapists, social workers, police officers, and ministers in our states to determine how many children and teenagers have surfaced with symptoms of 1999 programming, because it is the truth. It is a fact. We're going to get more documentation in just a moment from another author. And again, this 1999 programming is mentioned in Bryce Taylor's fictional work, and the page was page 244 for people who are sticklers for documentation. Now, the next book can be found on the internet. Anyone interested could run a search engine for the Freedom of Thought Foundation from Arizona. Walter Bauer has written an incredible book about 800 pages in length. In 1978, Walter Bauer wrote his first edition of Operation Mind Control. He had a hard time getting it published, but eventually some people surfaced to help in the funding. All the copies of the original Operation Mind Control disappeared in a matter of weeks. Later he found out it was the intelligence agencies that had backed him and helped him publish it so they could buy up all the copies so no one in this country could read it. Copies now go for $650. So this time he did it right. This is the revised and expanded version. You can order it. There are a few copies left. It's very expensive, but it runs about 800 pages. You can chat with Walter Bauer on the internet. Please check it out, because notice what he says inside his book. Here's a quotation concerning two fictional doctors. No, these are real doctors. He has initialed their names to protect them. Again, it's almost like Bryce Taylor's quote, Dr. A. We've heard the patients say, many of them, what does he say? It's the year what? It's the year 1999, and again we're discussing programming. We're discussing programming where violence is to be committed, escalating up to that year. Now why? Why are so many children committing murders in classrooms of parents? Could there possibly be a connection? Now, I'm going to go to a subject that for a few moments will seem to be unrelated. But if you will look closely, we're going to tie them together at the last minute. In Walter's book, he states that these people are programmed according to the Greek language. He says that alphas appear to be sexually programmed. I mean, they're betas, they're deltas. Notice he says that deltas are programmed to be killers. There's thetas, they're psyche killers. This is from interviews conducted by psychologists, professional deprogrammers, and therapists. All the information was pulled together. But again, he states that they're using Greek letters to do the programming. At the bottom, again, he mentions another letter from the Greek alphabet. For example, he states that omega programming is a program built into these mind-controlled victims where if anyone tries to interview them, any professional therapist tries to help them, they commit suicide because they're programmed with omega programming. So apparently more than just the doctors understand the Greek language. I won't leave this one up too long lest you figure it out. It's very fuzzy. It's a neon sign in the window in Washington, D.C. It's a Greek letter. When I went down the street, I saw the Greek letter. My photographer was in the car. It was Christmas time. I said, jump out and get me a photograph. There was no place to park. He said, why? I said, it's a homosexual shop. He said, how do you know? Because they always use this particular Greek letter. It's a secret form of communication. He said, Al, sometimes I worry about you. Till he went inside and he took a good look. And then he ran out the door. He said, oh, no, you won't believe all the lesbians, all the homosexuals were in there buying the worst literature. And he said even, there were even in the window 2 male little elves kissing, 2 little female elves kissing. It was Christmas time. He said, how did you find this out? I said, it's very well known. It's even been in major motion pictures about this little Greek letter. Now let's move on to Hebrew letters. You do not have to be a scholar. You do not have to attend some theological seminary to find out that Hebrew letters are involved in magic and witchcraft at the deepest levels. Here's a quote again from Walter Bauert in his book. He's talking about mysticism that is tied up with a type of magic that involves Hebrew letters. He states that he didn't know anything about this, but by deprogramming people, it constantly was coming up from different people through different therapists in different parts of the country. When screening patients, he developed a technique to make sure he was not leading them on. He very carefully used phrases so that these people would have to come up with this information on their own. When it's brought out that people have been programmed with Greek letters and Hebrew letters, they always say, well, it must have been the therapist. He was leading them on. He was putting these words in their mind. Again, let's get some more proof. A former Prophecy Club speaker, Fritz Springmeier, stated in his monumental book the very same fact, that Hebrew and Greek letters were used for programming in this advanced MK Ultra, Project Artichoke, Project Monarch mind control programming. Notice the page numbers. Page 68. Again, he's stating that the Illuminati is using Hebrew. And they're using these to label the different altered personalities when they split the personalities in these victims. The personality split is created by extreme torture. Let's read a little. In the second quote it says, the programs are put into a system and given codes. These programs use Greek, Hebrew, and Druidic letters or other esoteric languages in their activation codes. Now again, at the bottom he mentions again Hebrew letters. That's paid to program a whole generation by just blowing up a building with children in it. And they would all be programmed with the same storyline that would appear in the twin trauma-based program when JFK was shot, because what great, powerful group could kill a president and get away with it? Now do you understand how it works? You could Nightmare on Elm Street, now deceased, stated, I have the articles in my file, that his mask was based on the face of Lee Harvey Oswald. Again, in one of the movies, this killer is standing across the swimming pool from teenagers and he says, you are all my children. And they are his children because they were all. Can you name a movie utilizing this word Elm Street? Notice it's called Nightmare on Elm Street. And the actor who starred in